All right, all right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Black Lives Matter LA weekly. This is not a drill town hall. Today's theme is about canceling rent and countering displacement. And before I get started, I want to lift up the name of Jacob Blake, right, who is hopefully recovering to the best of his ability and sending thoughts and prayers to his family. Also, Anthony McLean, who was killed here in LA County within the past few weeks by police. And so folks, might be wondering or might be asking, why is Black Lives Matter talking about canceling rent and countering displacement, right? And so it's really important to remind folks that Black Lives Matter was started as a movement to counter state-sanctioned violence. Right, a lot of people, only associate us with police murder, but actually the Black Lives Matter movement was started after the murder of Trayvon Martin, right, who was actually murdered by a vigilante, right, like our folks in Wisconsin who were just murdered by a vigilante just recently, right? And so we know that there are so many different forms of state-sanctioned violence that are attacking Black folks, right? And the housing crisis that our country and our county and the city of LA have been in for quite a long time and have really been exacerbated by the coronavirus crisis is also a form of state was a fabled persona on the house who hailed from two. Right. You're good, brother. So this is also, right, a form of state-sanctioned violence against our communities. Not only that, right, we know that there were 60,000 houseless folks in Los Angeles before the coronavirus crisis, right? And that around 40% of those folks were Black, even though LA County is only 8% Black, right? We also know that we were talking about 3 a day in LA before the coronavirus pandemic, right? Meaning that 3 houseless folks were dying in the city of LA every single day, right? Because of neglect from the state, right? This is state-sanctioned violence against our communities. And we also know, and the data shows that Black houseless folks also have some of the highest rates of interaction with police, right? And violence from police. And we lift up, the names here in Los Angeles of Brendan Glenn and Charlie Africa, right? Who were both Black folks who were pushed into houselessness, right? And who were ultimately murdered at the hands of police. So we know that this issue, right, of houselessness, this housing crisis, this, coming potential evictions crisis, right, is absolutely a form of state-sanctioned violence, right? And so that's why we're going to be talking about it here tonight. And I failed to introduce myself, but my name is Joseph Williams. I'm a member of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, and I'm really blessed to be here today with 2 amazing hosts or amazing guests on our show tonight, Zerita Jones and Damien Goodman, who are both involved in so much powerful work, right, in LA. And I really want to let them introduce themselves, their organizations, and the work that they're doing that connects to this issue. So Zerita, I'll pass it to you first. You clicked yourself on mute, sister.
Greetings, Joseph, and thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Um, I am Zerita Jones, and I belong to quite a few organizations, and I'm just going to stick it quickly to the top 5. Originally, I started this work with the Concerned Community Members for Chesapeake Apartments. It is a tenant association that I assisted in co-founding to fight gentrification here on our property. It's approximately 425 units, and we're still going strong. The next would be the Baldwin Lamerge Crenshaw Local of the Los Angeles Tenant Union, where we just systematically give renters' rights workshops and inform tenants and renters of their rights and what they can do to self-advocate. Also, ACE Action Los Angeles, I happen to be a member of their tenants chapter. And that's the boots on the ground. So when you see the yellow t-shirts and you see us in Sacramento and City Hall and in front of the I guess you can say, businesses of those corporate landlords shouting with our bullhorns, that would be us. Also, Liberty Community Land Trust. I just happen to be the vice chair, and we're about to buy them all, y'all. So make sure you get on, you sign the petition, and our definite motto is put 5 on it, and to be part of that movement so we can buy this property, this 40 acres for our community. And lastly, I am part of the Los Angeles County Client Coalition, and I happen to be their board secretary. And we just make sure that those that have mental health issues are not forgotten in this rental struggle. So thank you. And then I guess I would like to pass it to my brother Damien Goodman.
Uh-oh, I got to follow that. Hello, Black people and allies. My name is Damien Goodman. In addition to being a member of BLM since those first days before it was even known as BLM, I remind people that justice for Trayvon Martin started in Leimert Park Village. That day, that action, we all came out to our center, our little Africa town, to protest our disgust and frustration with the system that has regularly not seen us as humane and made sure that our voice could be heard. Has grown into a powerful movement. I've been holding down this front, keeping in thoughts and prayers, and been in coalition with you, Joseph, and Akili, and Melina, and Jen, and so many others that have been able to move this conversation forward, move this effort beyond what I think any of us could have imagined. It was in 2013, right? And I'm pleased to be here in a variety of capacities. I'm the executive director of the Crenshaw Subway Coalition. We've been fighting on environmental racism, transportation justice, and now we focus on resisting gentrification, that's one, but also promoting community wealth building, making sure that as we identify the problem, we also identify the solution. We live in and I can say this here, they tell me I might have to pull this back since I'm trying to buy a mall, y'all, but I don't know, man. This white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative, capitalistic system.
Right.
That's just what it is, y'all. I mean, it is literally killing the planet and killing Black people, right? If he's still down for it, like, what will it take? I don't know. And so, you know, we as a coalition have not just been about resisting and pushing for policy and being in coalitions with incredible sisters like Zerita. We've been about talking about an alternative way of doing things, an alternative way of sharing the wealth, an alternative way of building true community stability by basically going back to our original African roots of community. Not this crass individualism, but looking amongst oneself, recognizing that as a whole, we are only as strong as our weakest member, right? And so right now I'm engaged in, as part of a huge coalition that has grown, and I am so proud of that I've been entrusted to be one of the leaders of downtown Crenshaw. The acquisition of our most iconic Black center of commerce and culture in smack dab in the middle at our Freedom Square, Crenshaw Boulevard and King, and a shout out to Tori Reese to be on the front for a while talking about adding Malcolm X to Crenshaw Boulevard. So right, the future intersection of MLK and Malcolm X. To say that this process of gentrification, this process of displacement, this process of neighborhood disempowerment needs to be met with an equal and stronger force of community empowerment, community ownership. Not ownership for one Black person's sake at the harm of the rest of Black folk. Not ownership for one collection of Black people's sake, but ownership for the stability and the sustainability of a Black Los Angeles. Somebody say there will be Black people in Los Angeles' future.
There will be Black people in Los Angeles' future, y'all.
Free the land, y'all.
Oh, definitely.
I'm so glad to be here. Looking forward to this conversation. Love you, Joseph. Love you, Zerita, and so many others that have been with this movement for a while. Stay strong. And we know, I was saying it today. Don't get me started. Don't let me keep me on task, Joseph. these NBA players only didn't take the stage, didn't take the floor because of what y'all been doing in the streets. What we have made clear, what is acceptable in these times. We are moving systems, and I'm just so proud to be here tonight.
Absolutely, and thank y'all both. And I think both of your introductions, I think, are a real explanation of why we could only have two panelists tonight, because y'all wear so many hats, right, and are addressing these issues for our communities in so many ways, right? The multiple different organizations and positions that you all are in and work that you all are moving forward is so important, right? We wanted to give y'all the time to speak on a variety of different issues that are related, right, to this, the crux of the issue that we're talking about, right? The way that housing and the lack of housing and lack of affordable housing and the push out of our communities is a form of state sanctioned violence, right? So it's a hugely important to have y'all on. And before I move forward, I'll be remiss to not also thank our ASL interpreters. Right now it's Artie and Mac will also be coming on, I believe, later, but really appreciate y'all for helping us to make this space and this conversation more accessible. So with that being said, and just want to jump into the conversation. Zerita, I'll go to you first. Like I said before, we were already in a housing pandemic, a housing crisis before this pandemic, right? And it's really just exacerbated it even more. So can you talk a little bit about what's been going on with tenants both before and during the pandemic, and what the situation is right now for renters, as you know, the vast majority of us are?
Well, definitely before the pandemic, it was just straight up gentrification. There's no easy, polite way to say it. There's no skirting around it. I've seen them sell our neighborhood off by evicting buildings at a time. I don't think there's been a day that I have passed by any neighborhood within 3 miles of my house and not seen someone's furniture outside at the curb, just because. Um, it's devastating, for someone to have been in a community for as long as I have, and to watch it go the way that it has. And saying that, I mean, it being sold off, and we're just completely 100% left out of the ball game. Whether we attempt to buy a ticket or not, there's no seats for us. And during this pandemic, it just showed us the level of despair and the level of disinvestment within our community, and just the lack of human decency. Because I've ran across for sale buildings and properties within our community that promote gentrification, like come invest and participate in the gentrification of South LA and Inglewood. And just reading the article itself is just appalling, and it's relentless. And when you see things of that nature, it's planned. It's not by accident. It's just not, oh, this was a house that I can afford, so I'm coming to your neighborhood. This is specifically to move us out, and where we go, it really doesn't matter to them. I hope I answered that question.
Absolutely, and I'm sure I'll come back to you on it again, to delve a little bit more deeply into how it is currently, right, with coronavirus. But I also wanted to ask before we do, because Damien, I know your family, I've heard you talk for a while. As you said, we've been in partnership and organizing spaces with each other for a while. And I know your family has been in LA for over 100 years or so, right? And this current situation, right, where we're talking about folks being evicted, we're talking about folks being pushed out of their communities, it's not new, right? It's not new, and there have also been histories of resistance against it. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of that history and some of the reasons that pushed you to start doing the work that you're doing?
Right. I appreciate you, brother. So, I think one of the most important things that we do, especially as an advocacy organization, Crenshaw Separate Coalition, that's focused on community education, mobilization and leadership development is get people to understand the systems, right? Much as BLM gets folks to recognize it ain't just one cop, it's the whole system, right? And this system of gentrification involves public and private actors and a typical what's called as investment and divestment cycle, right? You come in and you come out, you come in and you come out. And it's to create, in so many respects, a false wealth and create an opportunity for exploitation. Now, I know that's deep, but let's just think about this, right? There was an intention to remove the manufacturing jobs that made the stable middle class Black Los Angeles, right? And those jobs then moved somewhere else, right? To the suburbs, to many of these other states. And now there is an intention to invest back in these formerly divested areas, you know, the creation of Silicon Beach, the reimagination, the redevelopment of Culver City into a cultural arts center, right? And that cyclical cycle allows folk to invest and divest and take land cheaper than they would otherwise, right? Creating wealth along the way for those that have pockets big enough to play, right? So just think about that in general, right? And you know, some of us got duped back in like the late 90s and 2000 to go out to those beautiful homes, right? They were all talking about how great, you know, living in Moreno Valley was. And now folk that live in Moreno Valleys in the suburb want to move here. So recognize that cycle, recognize how that creates a certain level of wealth, and then recognize how those who are always being exploited in the process are Black people, right? We already know that Black people do not have as much wealth as white folk. Numbers that went back, I think the year was 2018, was the median household, the median wealth, not income, wealth of a black family was somewhere around 4,000 to 18,000, depending on who you ask, and the median wealth of a white family was 140,000, right? So, like, regardless of whether you think it's feasible, show me something other than a check. I'm talking about reparations that alleviates that imbalance, that inequality, right? The inequity, right? And so given that we have lower wealth, we're regularly prey to these cycles of investment and divestment, investment and divestment. And now we're on prime real estate, right? We got folk that bought their houses in 1990 for $90,000 and today are worth 600. And that's the low end, right? I'm in Leimert Park where I've lived for 27 years. I was born and raised in Jefferson Park before then, right? And it used to be that this was an opportunity for housing stability. Used to be that a market rate apartment was affordable to working class people, right? Like if you made just $15 an hour, you could live in Leimert Park. That's not even an option now, right? And part of that has to do, when we talk about that cyclical cycle, decisions by large actors, right? I'm talking about the state government, aided by the real estate industry. The most powerful industry on the planet is finance, insurance, and real estate. That said, we have decided that this is a hot area, right? And they do a whole bunch of things along the way. One of the first things they do is they over-police the area. Why? Because for those that had otherwise driven through our community with the windows rolled up to feel comfortable, pushing the strollers and walking their dogs, you can't have Alejandro and Dante on the corner just talking, just being, right? Because they operate, I mean, in a mindset where that's just considered a threat to them. And we see that with Breonna Taylor, right? We know that the reason why the police were more intense on her block, right, is because they wanted to clear folk out for new luxury development. You got to see this as a bigger system. These are not isolated actions.
Hold up. You're going to have to explain that for folks. You're going to have to explain that for folks who are not aware of the connection that you're making. I think a lot of folks aren't aware of that connection related to Breonna Taylor's murder.
By the way, why aren't the killer cops arrested? I mean, they put that, I'll be nice, that Republican Black Attorney General on the stage the other night. I was just wondering why he even had any time to do anything but find ways to press charges on those killer cops, right? So, and you see this, right? Just think about the gang injunctions in Echo Park, bro. I'm old enough, I'm 38. I'm old enough to remember when a Dodger game ended, we were getting out of Echo Park. We weren't trying to stay around. Now you go to Echo Park, you see the bodegas, you see the people that look different than the folks that traditionally have been there for years walking their dogs, right? What had to happen to make people feel comfortable? One, you had to build up downtown, right? Creating opportunity and jobs. And those folks wanted to live a little bit closer. But in order for folk to feel comfortable living next to our brown brothers and sisters, you had to implement a gang injunction where folk just felt, literally just standing next to each other, wearing the same color or wearing a different color, getting into that gang database, they were susceptible of being picked up, criminalized, thrown in, and pushed out, creating a whole level of insecurity and pressure on just Black, brown folk for being present in the community that they grew up in the community where their family lived, right? And so Breonna Taylor was on a block that was slated for a luxury development, right? And so the police, doing a very similar thing, started cracking down, right? To make it difficult for folk to stay on that block, not just on that block, but just in general in that community, because they had to engage in their ethnic cleansing of the area so they could bring in a crowd of a different perspective, a different persuasion, right? Complexion, excuse me, a different complexion, so that they could feel comfortable living in that environment. Because I mean, at its root, you know, people are born. It's very hard to be born in America and as a white person and not come with a racist mentality. It's just you're fed with those images, no matter what your intentions are, right? You were told that the presence of Black people, the presence of brown people is a threat to you, right? And it's reinforced in all kinds of ways, right? And you can be a down-ass white ally, excuse my language, right? But you were fed with those images from cradle to grave, right? And that's why I'm so proud we got white allies like White People for Black Lives that are intentional about talking to their cousins, about talking about how they can be anti-racist, not just not racist, but anti-racist, and break that down, right? So I won't get into that, but let's just be real. Part of the reason why the police were knocking on Breonna Taylor's door, as they have so many others, is because of gentrification. So we got to see that tie. They are not separate. These are both versions, as you said from the jump, Joseph, of state-sanctioned violence.
Absolutely. And thank you for making that connection for folks who are not aware, right? Because I think that has intentionally been suppressed as well, right? That connection between her murder and the general over-policing in that neighborhood, specifically targeting the push out of folks, right? And so we see absolutely, right, we talk about police murder as the tip of the spear, right, of state-sanctioned violence, that there are so many other pieces that are directly connected to that tip, right? And that tip is literally pushing forward and making space the way for gentrification, for push out, for folks to profit, right, off of, you know, the theft of, once again, our land, labor, or whatever else, right? So thank you for breaking down both that history, right, and also making the direct connection with Breonna Taylor, right, and the issue of gentrification. And Zerita, I wanted to go back to you now to talk about, you know, we are on the verge potentially of a eviction tsunami, right? We all, I believe, work with Elena Pop, the great, you know, anti-eviction lawyer, who calls this the eviction tsunami, right? That's potentially coming, much larger than a wave, right? Because of the coronavirus pandemic, you know, and the way that folks have lost jobs, lost the ability to make money and to pay rent over the past few months. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, Rule 1 and explaining what that is and how that's about to expire and what that means for folks, and what folks are doing to push against that and to protect renters from eviction right now?
Yes, actually I can. You know, with that being said, trying to fight back is hard. And it starts with informing the public, because if people don't know or don't understand how this all fits together, and where they are standing in the middle of the road when the bulldozers start coming, they have no idea how to protect themselves. So when it comes down to Rule 1 was put in place to try to alleviate some of the pressure of the coronavirus. And it comes in basically 5 parts. So it applies to any unlawful detainers that are being filed. That's number one. And number two, it's the issuing of the summons by the court. They had literally stopped the court from issuing a summons in order for you to be called in for this unlawful detainer. So without a summons, nothing goes forward.
An eviction summons, correct?
An eviction summons, right? When you receive that, 3-day notice to pay or quit, and then you receive that filing with that case number of that eviction, and you're supposed to answer. Well, they had ceased to give those notices and those file numbers, so there would be no way to answer, and everything is just completely halted. Then early default. So they even those that had been filed, there is no way, because of the coronavirus, that they can automatically win by default because you don't appear in court because you're sheltering in place. So they had put a halt on that also. Then the trial time. So those people that had might have had evictions filed on them prior to this corona pandemic, they literally kind of stopped it and said everybody that has had a court date as of April, I believe the date is April 6th. If you've had it filed on you, then there's no case that's going to move forward during this coronavirus time. So that also saves those individuals that would have been put out from being thrown into the street while we're supposed to be sheltering in place. And then there's like a sunset rule. So once that was all done, and say as if the governor, we know that the emergency started on March 4th, but we don't have an end date. So we don't know when this is over. We don't know when everything is going to open back up. But whatever that date is given to us, whenever this is over, we had 90 days in order to resume our lives, try to see if our jobs are still there, try to see if we can find a new job. And that 90 days was to give us an option to go back to paying our regular rent payments, not try to make up the payments that were due that we might have missed because of this, but to try to get back to the normal payments. And all that's going to go away. They decided they didn't want to renew Rule 1. We're all pressuring all the renters' rights organizations from top to bottom, A to Z. We're pushing for the governor to take and extend this Rule 1 in order to prevent the first wave of this tsunami. And the way that Elena Pop says it, it's going to come in waves. Unfortunately, it's going to be the first wave, and it's going to be the second wave that's going to be a little bit further off. So we're trying to push for that. At least that first wave won't hit us so hard, because the courts are supposed to be opening up September 1st.
Absolutely. So thank you for breaking that down. It's obviously a complex rule, and clearly there's so many ways that landlords, and especially these corporate landlords, use to evict folks, right? And to push folks out. And so this Rule 1 was protecting folks from a number of those ways. But as you mentioned, it also wasn't going to absolve the issue of folks' back pay and rent, right? Right. It also was only in effect right now until September 1st, right? So as of September 2nd, just in LA County alone, there are potentially almost 450,000 families, right? Yes. Who could be evicted, right? Who are at risk of being evicted because they've been affected severely, right, economically by the coronavirus pandemic. So huge, like you said, potential first wave of this tsunami that could be coming September 2nd if, the governor or other folks don't take action to stop it. So
wait, I thought our governor was a progressive Democrat, Zerita. Help me understand that.
Well, we got to remind him. We got to remind him that he's a progressive.
Oh, you being too nice. Let's be real. Let's just talk about it, right? Sacramento is controlled by real estate Democrats. They've bought off both sides of the aisle. I don't care if they sound like they're good on the police violence bill. They are bad, most likely, on real estate, because that's the mother's milk of politics. right? I
Most
mean, how many
definitely.
more people we need being arrested by the FBI? You know, I ain't rooting for the FBI, but I ain't really rooting for these folks downtown approving these gentrification projects either,
Right.
Correct.
right?
Correct.
And we have difficulty. This should be a no-brainer, y'all. How is Garcetti? How is Newsom even thinking about this, right? I mean, we got 40 million unemployed people. It's not
Yeah.
like people are just like making the decision not to pay rent. People don't have money. They're being forced to choose between their medicine and their rent. They're being forced to choose between food and rent. I mean, it's just, you know, I've seen some good actions, and I'll say this over and over again. If he was standing right in front of me in Newsom, and actually I think I told him this when he was in his like inauguration or in his governor-elect position. I said, if you were right on this real estate and gentrification thing, bro, sign me up for your presidential. But you're wrong on this, and that's too deep. That's too deep. I mean, you can't be okay about seeing the 16, 17 million people in California who are renters, and specifically the Black people in places like Los Angeles who are renters. A vast majority of whom are renters, just like everywhere else, right? Being let house insecure, being pushed on the street in the middle of a pandemic. It don't make no sense. It don't make no sense, but money talks. And folk need to make sure that they're making clear that the target is not just the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court or whoever is doing these laws, right, or doing these rules. It's the governor. It's the legislature. So call your governor, Gavin Newsom, call your assembly member and state senator, and tell them to get right on this.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And I'm going to take and put a little dollop of whipped cream on top of that cupcake you just made, Damien, because they're opening the courts to allow evictions before the pandemic is actually over. So there's a coalition that you're trying to make people homeless, and you're trying to put people in the streets. And I don't know who you're helping. Well, we know who they're helping, but I don't know who specifically, you know, they're helping. But all this is going on while our children are still at home trying to learn during a pandemic. So you created, I don't know what's bigger than a tsunami.
And Zerita, I want to ask you, because Damien made a call to action, right, to call folks, legislators, to call Gavin Newsom, right? And there is a call out that's being made about a specific bill right now. We know that it's, you know, a Band-Aid on a much more gaping wound, right? But there is a call for a specific legislation right now that the governor can and that our state legislators can and should be acting to move forward. Can you talk a little bit about AB 1436?
Yeah, it's a bill that is supposed to help the threat of eviction for the renters that are affected specifically during this crisis. I mean, there isn't anyone, I believe, that isn't affected in some way. But of course, they want to act as if they're not affected, and they want to collect their rent as if they're not affected. No one's affected. But this is broken down into like 6 different parts. And the first part is that all of the rent, the tenants that cannot be paid, they haven't been able to pay during this crisis while they were losing their jobs or while businesses were shut down, they can't actually be evicted for that sum. So that amount of money, you can't be evicted for that. So we're pushing for this bill. And the second part of this is to resume the regular payments in 90 days after this is considered over. So when the state of emergency is declared over and everything is okay and it's declared and signed by the governor, we're asking for that 90 days that was also in Rule 1. So, you know, they kind of work together, but yet if we get this 1436, it'll help us out a lot. It'll stop some of this, the shenanigans that are going on. And then the third part of this is it's to encourage the tenants to make voluntary payments or arrangements with their owner. Not anything that's mandated, but voluntary payments that this is what I think that I can do. This is how much money is going to come in. We're going to try to alleviate whatever balance that we have with the monies that I do have that I am getting. And if not, then also to make sure that you communicate that also. The other part of that, which would be number 4, is it allows them to have that fair chance to pay back. So you get the 90 days to try to get yourself together, but then you also get the 12 months after those 90 days to try to break these payments up that you do owe into, I guess, bite-sized chunks with your regular rent. So it's not a lump sum, which is a considerable help. It's not a fix, but it's a considerable help, because no one that hasn't paid their rent in maybe 3, 4, 5 months can actually drop $6,000-7,000 as soon as this pandemic is over, because the world hasn't even started, and we're not saying just America, the US, California. We're talking about the world hasn't even regained its footing regarding this pandemic.
Right.
And then it also, number 5 is to allow the landlords to account for some of the rental assistance that they may have gotten on behalf of a tenant, and deduct that amount from what is owed. Because there's some landlords out there that did get some help. There's some tenants out there that were able to qualify for some assistance. Not everybody, unfortunately, but we want to make sure that they're not double dipping, which is, of course, if you don't take and tell them not to, they will. Okay, so to make sure that the tenant gets credit for whatever allowances that was made for that. And then also not to affect their credit. That would be part number 6. Once this is over, you have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that have not paid their rent, and to ding their credit for a pandemic that they had no control over is just absurd. So part of that would push for the fact that not to have their credit dinged because of this money that's owed during this pandemic and this crisis, and possibly this loss of either health or life in their families, and their income and their livelihoods.
Right. And again, thank you for breaking down a pretty complex, piece of legislation in the different ways that these things are going to affect renters. And even though there are 6 or so different protections that AB 1436 would give folks, right? And that we're absolutely calling on the governor and on these state lawmakers to pass this bill, right? And to make this the law. We also know that it would not be, a wound that would heal all of it, right? It wouldn't provide rent forgiveness for folks for all these months that they haven't been able to pay. It wouldn't provide the relief in the form of cash assistance that most of our families and communities really need, right? It wouldn't provide a lot of these things, but it would at least help to stem the tide in this wave of evictions that's coming. And y'all talked also a little bit about how folks are profiting, right? How, even while, we know Jeff Bezos, has made record amounts of profits during this coronavirus pandemic, billions and billions of dollars. And we talked about how folks are potentially profiting, not potentially are, right, profiting off of the eviction and the push out of folks from their homes and their apartments. There's also another way, I think, that you all are both working on, that folks are seeking to profit from this pandemic, right, in a way that will directly affect our Black community, especially here in the Crenshaw area. Damien, can you talk a little bit about what's going on there with the Crenshaw Mall?
So I think, as everyone kind of heard back in April, CAM Group, which is Donald Trump's real estate buddies, had announced that they had an agreement to purchase the Crenshaw Mall, our iconic Black center of commerce and culture, the most iconic center of Black commerce in LA, right? Second largest region in America. And, by the time the LA Times story had dropped on that, I think it dropped in the morning, by that night, Crenshaw Mall was trending on Twitter. People were very upset about it. They were upset that it had been lost to a Donald Trump firm, even though people didn't know the connections then. I did, but and a lot of people at Crenshaw Subway Coalition did. But really just seeing it as a symbolism of gentrification, that a non-Black team and non-Black centered team would come in and buy a critical Black community asset and unleash a wave of gentrification. Now, let me be clear, right? The current owner of the Crenshaw Mall is a Black man. He's being forced to sell, and he had a gentrification plan too. Only color that matters in all of this really is green. People are looking to make a whole lot of money. by pushing out those folks that are in the J's, that are paying Section 8, or those seniors on fixed incomes, or those just working class people who can't afford $2,100 a month for a 2-bedroom, right? Which is most of us. They be us. They be Black people, right? And this was their agenda, right? The CIM group, they are all about what they call re-tenanting, taking people that currently live in the community and pushing them out to replace them with higher paying tenants that serve a more affluent class of people that don't look like me or you. And so when that was announced, you know, we had been putting together, and Sister Zerita is our vice chair, we had been putting together the community land trust, Liberty Community Land Trust. Somebody say free the land. Somebody say free the land.
Definitely free the land.
Okay. Come on, call and response. I don't care if you're on Zoom. I gotta get some response here, y'all. We have been bringing together industry professionals that kind of had been able to use their expertise to figure out how to do that. How could we actually create more housing that was permanently affordable for the historic Crenshaw community in our current economic profile, right? Folk that literally only make about $40,000, $50,000 a year on average. And I mean, as a family, not as an individual. Like, how could we create that? And so legit, that the day the story dropped, I'm like, how do we allow this to happen? We should just go ahead and buy it ourselves. And it was amazing because people said, yeah, we should do that. And then we put it out there. We called it Downtown Crenshaw because we recognize that malls across America are dying. Right now, this current one is just a sea full of asphalt. It's been not performing. That means not doing great for a while, but it's ours, right? And we want to keep that space and that place that is the intersection of Crenshaw and King, soon to be Malcolm X and King, right? Freedom Plaza is in the center of Crenshaw community, Black Crenshaw community for us. And so we said, okay, let's bring the team together. Let's bring together the professionals. Let's call it Downtown Crenshaw, and let's do it for us and by us. So if there is housing, it's housing that we can afford. If there's office, it's offices for us. If there's recreation, it's recreation for us. If you're bringing in a hotel, it's hotels for us. And then we introduce what we've been working on and lifting up for a while in our community, this concept of community wealth building, right? It's not good enough for one Black person to make a whole bunch of money at the expense of its workers and a community. In fact, that's a bad thing, right? So how can we advance these concepts of shared ownership, which really gets real community buy-in, right? You know, let's not look for a rich Black person to come in and buy the mall and quote unquote take care of it for us. Let's look at ourselves, right? And take ownership. And ownership can be in so many forms, right? Right now, our form is just saying it's $5 for a membership. We want everybody in. We want everybody at the table having a vote, especially folk that are Black in the community or care about the Black community. Right? Being radically inclusive and saying that is really the only way we can move forward, not just as it relates to this gentrification piece, which is pushing our grandmothers, our brothers and our sisters into houselessness at worst and at best out to, you know, godforsaken, well, I shouldn't say that, hot places like Victorville, Moreno Valley, and Lancaster, right? But so we can heal together as people. So in so many respects, and today was the bid deadline. And I appreciate everybody for signing those petitions, asking for an extension. We said, okay, fine. You want to keep it at 5 o'clock on Thursday? We'll go. And we put together a strong offer so the community can buy the mall. And you know what? The best part about this, I mean, you know, outside of BLM, I've never been part of any movement that has grown like wildfire like this, right? And I said that, I remember I was on this call with these national leaders, these national, primarily Black leaders who are focused on gentrification across America. And I said, you know what? We just have to go out there and be bold. The people are ready for this. They're ready for a bold action and saying, you know what, in this gentrification beast, you're not gonna take this. We're gonna own it, right? And we're gonna make sure that the wealth created for is gonna stabilize our community and lift up our people, beginning with the most marginalized, right? And so part of the program is like, we're not just gonna focus on our little bit 40 acres in a mall. Literally, the mall is for sale, 40 acres of it. I mean, how more symbolic can you get, right? We're gonna be focused on the community around it, right? Because if we don't get this neighborhood stabilization fund going, if we don't find ways in which we can buy land and permanently take it off the speculative real estate market so that people that look like us and meet the economic profile of existing residents are here, we'll be working for a mall redesign that we ain't even here to look at. We're not here to see. We'll be seeing it when we drive in from Lancaster, right? And so just talking about that, getting people to understand the system, and then just bringing in and seeing the attraction both locally in the actions. And Jan Williams is, you know, BLM core member, is our action committee chair, and Akili and Malcolm Harris, right? Just seeing the amazing energy, just being in that street saying that this is about self-determination. This is about saying that this is ours, right? This is about us bringing together the best of thinking and professionals to back up a community-centered vision for a people-centered redevelopment of the Crenshaw Mall that is sustainable, that is just, that is fair, that is a model for the world. And so, yeah, we put in our bid. We're going up against a bunch of big boys and girls, no doubt about that. But we have something the rest don't. That's the people. They can front. Come on, I'm not saying that when I say they buy off their Black people every now and then. I mean, more regularly than not every now and then. But we have a legitimate, broad-based community organization, over 400 community-based organizations and leaders, including Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, led by folk like Jan Williams and Akili, who's the chair of our community land trust, who are about rallying the masses. And we'll have likely an action, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, because they think we done died down. They think it's quiet. No. We still care about this. A lot of people just thought the process was over when we kicked CIM group out and got this opportunity to buy it. And so downtowncrenshaw.com is where you go to sign the petition, to give a donation, which allows you to become a member at just $5. Like, seriously, put $5 on it. You got $5 on it, right? So you can be a member and can be at the table, right? And when you make that donation and you become a member, eventually, when we put together what's known as a public offering to be an investor, so you can like literally have your dollars in it, you'll get a little bit of a discount. But this is what's been called by folk throughout the country as the most radical and progressive and most important positive urban development in the Black community that people have seen. And I just hope people get the word out. Downtown Crenshaw on Instagram, Downtown Crenshaw on Facebook, DT Crenshaw on Twitter, and downtowncrenshaw.com. Everybody should go there right now, sign the petition, and become a member.
You already skipped ahead to the action steps. I love it.
Hey, that was eloquent.
Hey, sister, with you.
Very much. And I think it's so important and beautiful, again, situating the struggle against gentrification and the struggle against push out and the eviction of our folks from our homes and our communities is absolutely a struggle against the state-sanctioned violence that has been perpetuated against our communities for hundreds of years on this continent, right? When we talk about, you know, the initial act of ripping folks from their communities, from their homes, from their languages, from their cultures, right? And forcing them into servitude elsewhere, forcing them into slavery, into torture, into other things elsewhere. And we talk about the hundreds of years of history, right? Of Black folks after that, right? Who had created their own communities, their own wealth, their own neighborhoods and relationships, and those communities being terrorized, those communities being burned down, those folks being pushed out of those communities, right? This move and this effort to, you know, not only reject that, right? Not only reject that push out, but to push for real self-determination for our community is very powerful, right? It is absolutely tied to this global uprising that we're seeing right now of Black folks saying, nah, yo, not anymore. Our lives matter, right? What happens in our communities matter. Our homes, right? And our ability to stay in our homes and our ability to build strong communities that give us the ties so we can look out for our neighbors and look out for our cousins and things like that. Those things are absolutely important, right? Hugely important. And are absolutely connected to this struggle and this fight. And so, Zerita, briefly, before we get into some quick action steps for the end, I just wanted to ask, you know, in that vein, what is your vision of what our communities need and how we get there?
Wow, we need so much right now because they just been putting their foot on us, or should I say, they've been putting their knee on our neck. We need jobs. We need a stable ecosystem where we have sustainable jobs. We're not talking about minimum wage jobs. We're talking about good paying jobs with um, benefits. We need stable housing. Um, we need good schools for our children to go to that have books, materials, and proper equipment, latest and update equipment. We need community banks. We need banks that are going to lend money to us. We're not talking about what you've put in our community, like those payday loans at whatever kind of interest rates that they're putting on us that you never get out of, for those that fall into that. But we're talking about just a regular bank where you can go and get a signature loan. I used to be able to do that, in my youth, and just off my name alone. And we need hospitals that are going to literally be concerned about our care and our well-being, and to treat the people in the community accordingly. So I think that would be a foundation right there. The jobs, we're talking about the stable housing, we're talking about the banking, we're talking about education for our children, and then of course we always need to play a place for us to play and just blow off some steam and get to know each other, and some green spaces and some community gardens and the things that we've been trying to do for so long, and just the means haven't been there. But like you said, Joseph, no more. We're definitely going to push for it. Every time I talk to, like Damien said earlier, every time I talk to my senator, every time I talk to my assembly person, every time I talk to my council person, that's what my conversation is. Are you going to be supporting our community banks? Are you going to be supporting our community land trust? And are you going to be supporting that all of these vacant properties that we have sitting in our community that no one's actually invested in, are you going to prevent them from being taken over by corporate landlords and developers that want us to make $100,000 a year in order to afford? Or you're going to make some seriously public and affordable housing, or are you going to give it to the land trust so we can take over and use that self-determination and get things done that you haven't been able to do, even after we've taxed ourselves in order to take and make things happen? And we're still waiting, and we're still waiting, and we're still waiting, and we can't wait no more. We don't have any more time to wait.
Absolutely. We absolutely do not. And as Audre Lorde said, right, we don't live rather single issue lives, right? And so this is a multifaceted movement, a multifaceted global uprising right now, right? During this time of, the coronavirus pandemic, during this time of a coming eviction wave, during this time of, these over and over and over again, these police murders of our folks, right? We are absolutely uprising against all of these issues because they're connected. And so as we're uprising against them, I want to pass it over to Damien, and then use Zerita for some brief action steps, and then I'll close out with some BLM action steps for folks as well.
So, I mean, I just want to, as we close out, right, talk about just this powerful moment that we're in. I know that we are very insecure, right? The first of the month is right around the corner, right? And a lot of folk haven't gotten a paycheck in nearly 6 months. And so, this time of uncertainty, and this economy is literally being held up by bubble gum and like toothpicks, right? And you got some fools in Congress not even giving people $600 a week, right? It's just ridiculous. But in this time of uncertainty, in this time of disaster capitalism, is also a time for reimagination. Yes, reimagining public safety, but also reimagining the world that we live in. Because laid bare before everyone throughout the world is the crass individualism and consequences of white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative capitalism. As we like to say, it's a problem now because white folk can feel it. And so how do we use this opportunity and understanding of injustice, oppression, racialized exploitation to build a new and better world. You are doing it, right? As BLM, you are moving structures that we were told in the past could never be moved. And we have to do that here on the gentrification front. And we can, right? There's amazing power that sisters like Zerita and the Tenant Union and ACE and others that are within this world of housing justice have, and backed by and working in coordination with and in allyship and coalition with organizations like BLM, we can move mountains, y'all. We can create, safer spaces and secure housing. But you got to believe it. You got to believe that we can buy them all, y'all. You got to believe that you can come together with your tenants and tell your landlord what to do. You got to believe that you can move the governor of California. I believe that we will win. And I've seen it. I've seen structures move over the last 6 months that I could not even imagine moving over the next 6 years. And it's because the people have been in the streets. It's because the people have been intentional about making clear that this system don't work and that we need to have a fair, just system. And so, the movement right now for us is Downtown Crenshaw. Again, downtowncrenshaw.com, DT Crenshaw on Twitter, Downtown Crenshaw on Instagram and Facebook. Sign up. That's that work that we're doing. And we're going to be in these streets. We need to be loud. We need to be proud. We need to be certain that we need safe spaces in our community, right? Not just one that's free from police violence and presence, but one that's free from the harm of eviction and displacement and gentrification.
Absolutely. Thank you, Damien. Action steps, Zerita, from your folks, the various orgs you're a part of.
The message is basic, it's plain, and it's simple. You need to know your rights, and you can't fight unless you know your rights. So, my number one thing is join your local tenants union at latenantsunion.org. There's 15 of them for you to choose from. Whatever one is closest to you, join, get informed, get into some of those meetings and some of those workshops. I'm going to say sign those petitions that you see that come across the desk. I'm going to say get involved, know what's going on in your community. I'm going to say share your knowledge. If you learn something, share it. I mean, knowledge is free. And if you got something that's tantalizing and informative to you, it may be tantalizing and informative to the person standing in line next to you, the person you're on Zoom with. Let them know what's going on. I wanted to say also, just like my brother Damien said, Downtown Crenshaw, that's the wave of the future for our community. Make sure we know what's going on, become a member, get involved. Your input is needed. Your input is wanted. That is not the way that they treat us when they come in our neighborhoods. They give us what they want us to have and they make us eat it and we don't have a say. We're asking for you to come and bring your words and your concerns and your ideas to us now. We want it with us. We want to do this as a community. Make sure you tell a friend. Make sure you tell a neighbor. Make sure you tell a family member, because it takes a village.
Absolutely. And we are over time, so I'm going to run through really quickly some action steps for us. But as we said before, AB 1436, make sure you're calling the governor, you're calling your state lawmakers about passing AB 1436. As we've also talked about before, SB 731, right? The police decertification bill to get these killer cops completely decertified, right? The Kenneth Ross Jr. bill. Make sure that you're calling your state assembly members right now about that. It passed out of the Senate. It's now in the Assembly. Make sure you're calling those folks about SB 31. We know this weekend, a couple of families that we work with are having angelversaries, actions for their angelversary. Cesar Rodriguez's family in Long Beach, Vanessa Marquez's family and friends in Pasadena, and also our partners at Central CSO are hosting the 50th Chicano Moratorium, right? A history for those folks of pushing back against violence and oppression from the state as well. So let's continue to do this work. Let's continue to build within our communities. Let's continue to vision radically. And like Damien said, let's believe that we will win. We have to really believe that the things that we're calling for, defunding the police, abolishing the police, reimagining public safety, reconstructing our societies. We have to really believe that we are the generation and we are the people who can make it happen. And so I'm really blessed to be with some folks who are making that change reality in our communities every day, who are activating folks, bringing folks into this struggle, and defending our communities every single day. So blessed to be with y'all. Thank you, Zerita Jones. Thank you, Damien Goodman. Thanks again to our interpreters and to everybody out there in TV land. We really appreciate y'all being with us tonight.
Thank you, BLM family.
And thank you. Remember, we fight, we win.
We fight, we win.
Hey, we fight, we win.
That's right.